What's up, everybody, and welcome to Flying with Doug. Tonight, we have a special guest on our season preview show. We are joined by Connor Clark of the Concept podcast. Connor, how you doing, man? Welcome back.
Pretty good, Doug. Thanks for having me on once again. It's great to see you, and it's great to preview the season.
And you know what? I was trying to think, who do I bring on to start to the season preview? Who do I? And I always enjoy talking to you, man. So I was like, the first person came to mind. Let's get Connor back on. I'm glad you're here, man. I'm glad you had the time. We definitely appreciate it. Let's start off. I haven't been able to talk to you in the last couple of weeks. What are your thoughts going into the season? What are you looking for from this team? What do you want to see from this team before we really get into the meat and potatoes of everything going on?
Yeah, first off, let's get into the obvious. There's a whole lot of new faces on campus and on this team. So I'm looking forward to really seeing how they're incorporated into the lineup. I know that's something we'll go over later, but really curious to see how the rotations are going to work out. Obviously, we got some exciting returning players, Nate Santos and Isaac Jack. And of course, having Malachi Smith on the team is great. Not Cheeks. Perhaps I'm missing a few, but it's good to have that balance of returning players and new faces at the same time. And I'm really excited and eager to see how the new recruits do.
And that's a great point. Sometimes I think we take for granted that you just show up on campus and you're ready to play. It takes time. It takes seasoning. So I'm glad you brought that up. Is there anybody of the new faces you're most looking forward to seeing?
Really curious and excited to see how Musa's going to do. But I'm going to shout out my guy, Zed Key. I've already met him a couple times in person. Let me tell you, Flyers who haven't had the chance to meet him yet, not only is he an incredible player, but he's an incredible all-around human being. He's already adjusted super well to the campus, it really seems like. He's really spreading the love. So I think what you guys are going to see is not only an experienced player, being a fifth year, but someone who's just eager to get on the court and someone who really knows what he's doing.
Okay, well, Connor, obviously we massively appreciate you. Thank you for everybody who's tuning in tonight. Massive appreciation, audio, video, however you're tuning in. We are live tonight. Thank you. First things first, let's get into the roster. We started touching on it there a little bit. Connor, in the first two exhibition games, and we'll talk about those a little bit more as we go on, we've seen the starting lineup of Malachi Smith. We've seen Javon Bennett. We've seen Enoch Cheeks, Santos, Key. How do you feel about that lineup as a group to start?
I think to start, I would say it's a great idea. Like I said, we got a lot of new guys coming in, and I know it's an exhibition. It's good to get them off the blocks, but it's also important to get these kind of shake the rust off of our returning players as well. Let's not forget this is a lineup that won a March Madness game, but obviously with Malachi Smith coming back healthy, we want to incorporate him in the lineup and get him in the rotation with someone like Javon Bennett, Nate Santos for sure, and especially Enoch Cheeks. So I like that lineup to start out. No complaints from me there, but I think that really makes me even more curious to see what the rotation is going to be like
in the actual games. So
yeah.
My main issue with that is the lack of shooting for me is an issue there. Mm-hmm. Nate Santos, we know he is a very good shooter. He shot, I believe it got up to 41% last season. We know he had some trouble in the Xavier game getting his shot to go down. That was definitely an issue. Javon Bennett shot, I think it ended up at 32% last year. Those are the main two shooters in that lineup. And then we have Malachi Smith and Enoch Cheeks, who by all means play a similar style of basketball. Obviously, Cheeks is a little bit bigger, does a little bit differently. Malachi kind of sets the floor a little bit. But they both want to drive. They both want to get to the basket, that kind of stuff. Does that starting lineup worry you in terms of rebounding and shooting? What are your thoughts on those two parts for that starting lineup?
Yeah, I think shooting's a fair concern to bring up. As you mentioned with Malachi and Nate Santos, I think Enoch Cheeks, I'm excited to see really how he's improved his shooting in the offseason. I wouldn't say he was a bad shooter last season, but I think there was definitely in some games room for improvement. We saw some good flashes in March Madness. Same with Javon Bennett as well. So I think shooting obviously needs some work, but I think we'll get there. We'll get to a pretty valid point about it. As for rebounding, yeah, I think that has to factor into what our rotations are going to be. I know we got a packed front court heading into the season. So with our 3, 4, and 5 rotation, so I think with rebounding, kind of to touch up on your point, I'd really be interested to see how they incorporate Isaac Jack or Amal Latong into the lineup. You know, being the taller players on our squad, but seeing how much of a rebounding machine, especially someone like Isaac Jack, can be. I think that would be crucial to see, and you know, given maybe the rebounding discrepancy in our small ball lineup with Zed Key or someone like that at the 5.
Yeah, and that's what. And I know you weren't able to catch the exhibition games. I watched the Xavier game, and then I listened to the Ashland game. Rebounding was an issue in both games. Now, I understand against Xavier a little bit more than I do against Ashland, and shooting was an issue in both games. Flyers shot the ball pretty well in the first half against Ashland, but it got a little bit sideways there in the second half, and that's kind of what brought that game back closer than it probably should have been. You know, after watching the 2 exhibition games, again, a little bit of overreaction after that, but I would almost love to see Latang get into that lineup and play maybe that stretch 4, but also that gives them some exercise on defense for rebounding. And then I almost think you move Nate Santos to a more natural position at the 3. He has all the ability of a wing player. He has the ability to shoot the 3. He has the ability to put it on the floor and get to the rim. He's got he's 6'7". He's got good size to guard wings and have switchability with other players. I'm wondering what the coaching staff isn't seeing from him that makes them feel more comfortable with a too big lineup and having Santos be the 3 with 2 guards. We talked about that even last year a little bit with Deron Holmes and Isaac Jack from time to time, where we would like to see Santos play more 3. Is there something that I'm missing or we're missing as a fan base that makes you think Santos can't play consistent minutes at the 3?
Definitely not. No, I think Santos is. I know he played a natural 4 last year, but let's be honest, he's a natural 3. I know. Sorry to go off topic, but I'm looking at some of these NBA lineups too. I think a team like the Bucks. Let's go. The Bucks are a great example. You got someone like Chris Middleton, who I really think is a lot like Nate Santos. I mean, obviously Middleton will shoot a bit better, but he reminds me a lot of Nate. He does everything that Nate does, and he plays a natural 3. Meanwhile, you can have someone that will then leave room for someone like Amal Latong at the 4, someone who's like maybe not a Giannis Antetokounmpo type, but a taller stretch 4 who can do a bit of everything. Because that is then going to end up leaving room for someone like Isaac Jack or Zed Key even. I think that creates more flexibility in the rotation. And if anything, that creates more solidarity in that too. Because I think our biggest, I'm not going to say problem, but our biggest, stack of players is in the 4 position. What type of 4 do we want to play at a given time?
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, Doug, I don't want to be switching up the style of the 4 play, like the 4 role every single time, because I don't want one game having a stretch 4, and then meanwhile we then go into the next game with Nate Santos playing a 4, and then playing a smaller lineup with someone like Enoch Cheeks at the 3.
Yeah,
I think if the coaching staff finds a way to make that more consistent, so that we always have a rebounder or a defensive big on the floor, so whether that be Zed Key or Isaac Jack, I think that's going to be the way to really unlock the team.
Okay, so in your opinion, I know we haven't got to talk about everybody, but let's just base it on what we saw in the exhibitions. 3 guard sets. Isn't pace going to have to be more weaponized this season? And I don't, Nate Green after the Ashland game on WHIO with John Bedell, they do a fantastic job breaking down the games afterward. I know I was overreacting to the exhibition. It's just an exhibition. But Nate Green said something important, I thought. He said, you have to practice like you play. And if the Flyers are practicing like this, I don't know how consistent and how good this season is going to go. It's not been a great brand of basketball. I know we're trying different lineups, we're trying different stuff, but at the end of the day, Connor, it's still basketball. You still have to put the ball in the hoop, and that ability doesn't just change when you got your real 5 out there or your 6th man out there with the starting group. Putting the ball in the hoop doesn't necessarily change, and it seems like the pace was not ever being pushed. We got to see the press a couple times after free throws and things like that, but even the press was not, causing any real havoc. I know sometimes it's token pressure just to slow them down, but Xavier picked that apart. Ashland didn't have a big issue with it. What are your thoughts there? Because to me, the direction of the team is still up in the air. I know, we got a game against St. Francis on Monday. I cannot wait. I'm beyond excited. But what do you think the identity of this team is going to be going into the season?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I've had time to think about it. I'm going to be honest, and this is going to be the same thing with every single team with a lot of new players on it.
Yeah.
The Flyers will have teething issues at the beginning of the season. Let's be honest. I'm not trying to be a pessimist. That is how a lot of new teams are going to work out. I think certainly, like you said, with the pace, with our shooting, I think that isn't going to be solved in one game. I mean, will we like it to be solved in one game in a perfect world? Absolutely. Every single Flyer fan will want that. But I do think that the Flyers will take some time to figure it out. But at the same time, we got to remember, look at the non-con schedule we have. We have a Northwestern.
We're gonna dive into it shortly, but it's loaded.
We have a Marquette coming into the building, and then we got to go to Maui. I know that's not our own home floor, and we can bring up whatever Maui stats we want, but we're playing UNC.
Yeah,
they're not going to lay back.
No.
So I think shooting is going to be something we are going to need to figure out and push over these next couple games.
No, that's a great point. And that's what I thought is coming into the season, we no longer have our All-American. Dron Holmes moved on to the NBA. We hope for a speedy recovery and him to be back on the court as soon as he can.
Absolutely.
Obviously, an Achilles is a year-long injury, so next year he'll be back. But with 3 guards, if you're going to play this way, it has to be up pace. It has to be up tempo. Zed Key can run the floor. Nate Santos can run the floor. That has to be our identity. If we're not going to be able to, we're not going to overload the floor with shooters in an All-American, we have to push the pace. Malley has to be outrunning. Cheeks has to be outrunning. Bennett has to be, if it's not going to the paint, it's popping for a wing 3.
Right.
This has to be a constant attacking offense. And I'm going to ask you a question about it shortly here. Posh Alexander, another guy who can push the pace and get to the basket and do things like that.
Yeah.
We have the bodies to do this. I'm hoping that is the identity of this team, though, is a team that wants to push and get into transition. I just didn't see it. And that's why I go back to the Nate Green quote. You practice like you play. You can still run a fast break in an exhibition game. We saw plenty of teams play really well in their exhibition games, and the excuses were not, we're trying different things. We're throwing out different rotations. I'm sorry, but you still can play decent basketball against a bad Ashland team. They're a Division II team for a reason. I'm sorry that I wanted to see better basketball. So let's talk about Posh Alexander.
Yeah.
We bring him in. I'm sure he's getting a nice chunk of change from the NIL. Doesn't start the first 2 games. Malachi Smith is the starting point guard. Javon Bennett's the 2 guard. Is there any question marks for you in your head, or is that just getting Malley some rust off, letting him, get not accumulated, but you know what I mean, to reacclimated to the game? Is that what you think that was?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what that was. Obviously, you don't go out and scout for a player like Posh Alexander and then expect to leave him on the bench all year. He's not a project. He is somebody who is experienced and is ready to start a game. Keyword, start. But at the same time, yes, Malachi Smith is somebody who has been unfortunately plagued with injury after injury. And I think it's key that now he's back healthy, at least for the time being, and how we can hope and pray that he stays like that all season. I think it's crucial that he gets time, at least for now. Like you said, shake off the rust, get whatever teething issues figured out. But I would be very shocked if we don't end up starting Posh Alexander come the start of the season. Maybe the first game I could see Malley starting, but Posh still getting more minutes. And then we transition into games like the Maui or some games like the non-con where Posh would start. I think that's actually a better idea, given, I think, to go back to the NBA, what some of the teams are doing with the rookies. Look what the Hawks did. First couple games, didn't start their number 1 pick, Ricochet.
Yeah.
And then now, because you get him comfortable, you get him acclimated. And then when it's time for, say, the 4th game of the year, like they did last night, Ricochet's in the starting lineup. And so I think in terms of overall comfort level. And I get this sport is about getting out of the comfort zone a little bit. It's about being tough. But I think in order to keep that all balanced and to make sure that they're properly ready to go, I think Posh will absolutely start. And yeah, definitely shout out to Lee for making that point. Posh is absolutely extreme defensive.
Yeah, Lee Broadstrop on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Posh is a defensive king, and that's what we want. When we're in the off season, Connor, I'm thinking in my head, okay, if we play this lineup, if we play Cheeks, Posh, and Malley, that's going to be a nightmare defensively for teams.
100%.
There's so many different things we can do, but I think it still has to fit on the other end. Defensively, it could be an absolute nightmare for team, but you're playing three guys that there's no space. So that's why I'm thinking, Letang needs to be out there probably a decent amount. And he looks like a unicorn, flat out. The guy feels like he's got that year. He's a Kristaps Porzingis light at this point in his career. In 2 years, maybe he could be an NBA type prospect. But you got to have a guy with who could do both. Nate Santos in that kind of lineup because of the shooting would be huge. 5 out in that kind of set to me makes so much sense. And then you have Letang crash after a drive, or there's so many different things we could do with that 3-guard set to offset some of the shooting. But you have to have at least 2 guys who make the defense react and be to set up some driving lanes. But on defense, that is going to be a massive advantage for the Flyers. And then even Javon Bennett, who's a good on-ball defender, but you have to put him on the right guys. We saw it last year. His size, it's unfortunate. At times, is a detriment. Against a bigger Xavier team, we saw it. They were physical. They were a bigger lineup. Let me ask you about this guy because you mentioned him earlier. We're going to talk a little bit more about the roster and the rotations. Hamad Musa, obviously a high-profile recruit, a guy who is getting some NBA chatter.
Absolutely.
It's going to take time because you could see against Xavier, they are like, yes, you may be talented, but we are going to pressure you. We're going to make you put the ball on the floor. We're going to make you make decisions with the ball. And he dribbled it off his foot a couple times, kind of got a little bit of bullying. I'm not going to go overboard. It's an exhibition game, but they made sure they were pressuring him. How many games do you think it takes for him to get comfortable? Because we've got some tough games, dude. Northwestern, UNC. I mean, these guys are going to be ready to go off the bat.
Right. And I won't bring up Marquette too much because I'm sure that'll be a later talking point. But yes, I don't know if I can list an exact amount of games it's going to take for Musa to get comfortable. But that being said, look at how highly recruited he was. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing like I touched up on the Posh point, which was you're not going to leave a guy like that who you recruited that highly on the bench. You can't for that long. Even no matter how stacked your front court might be. Now, I get it. The Flyers and Coach Grant, they're going to want to experiment a little bit with how stacked the backcourt is, or not the backcourt, the front court is. But at the same time, yes, I think this could end up being one of the tricky things we're going to end up figuring out at the start of the season. How are we going to balance that rotation while making sure the right guys are getting the right minutes? Musa is that question mark. Because, like you said, we want to play Letang at the stretch 4. But then again, so is Musa. And so if we're going to do that, where is Zed Key going to go? Where is Isaac? I mean, we know where Isaac Jack's going to go, but where would Zed Key end up going if we push Santos to the 3? Or if we have someone even on our bench like Juwan Simon or even Marvell Allen, someone who's a stretch 2 and 3. We have a lot of guys who are hybrid in terms of role. Hamad Musa, I think, is a perfect textbook stretch 4. And he's a little too tall to be. Yeah.
Because I would say right now he's not big enough to play a 10-4. He'd have to play 3 with Santos and somebody else in there. Because
I didn't mean 4, I meant 3. Yeah. Okay. Why did I say 4?
Right. No, then my bad. You're good. Keep going.
Yeah, I think with the 3, it's that rotation has to be Santos, and then I think Musa right behind him. But I could see, and I think we might even come to expect this, a rotation where even if it's for a few minutes, mix it up, push Santos to the 4 a little bit, and allow Musa to come in at the 3 so they can complement each other. Mm-hmm. We know Santos. We know how much of a Swiss Army knife that man can be.
Yeah,
can drive, can shoot, could get a few rebounds every now and then. And as we saw, even in some of the March Madness games, he can be a dog defensively late in the game. Hamad Musa, let's face it, I don't like using this word a lot. Hamad Musa might end up being a project.
Which is fine.
Which is absolutely fine.
He is a raw talent, a guy with massive potential, but those guys have to be manicured and built into the next level. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think, but let's not forget, for anyone who's feeling any trepidation in the Flyer fan base about projects, let's not forget who was a project for the Dayton Flyers. A familiar face by the name of Obi Toppin.
Yep.
A familiar face by the name of Duron Holmes II.
Not as much of a project.
Not as much, but still needed some adjusting.
Yeah.
Maybe someone, if we want to throw someone like Ibby Watson in there, go ahead and throw it in. So I wouldn't fear too much about him being a project because there is quite a lot of upside. Hamad Musa, I think, has great potential to be a second or even third year Flyer if he wants to be. But I think it's a matter of how he can fit in with that front court rotation. I think someone like Zed Key, I'd be really interested to see how much of a veteran leader role he can play, maybe in terms of mentoring or even like further challenging Hamad Musa for that role. I'd be very curious to see how that all works out. I think having Zed Key is a very underrated addition.
I think that's a great point because this team need a leader. They need a vocal leader, and they need a guy who probably leads by example. I think Nate Santos is probably a little bit more loud than Zed Key, but Zed Key's a guy who leads by example type of player. I think that could be a good dynamic. I'm hoping those guys are doing that because we don't get to see all of that stuff. But with a young team, with an Emil Tang, with a Hamad Musa, with a Marvell Allen, with some of these younger guys, you got to have your older guys who are still there who can teach and show these guys what it takes to be effective players. Last thing I'll ask you about the rotation and the roster. In my opinion, Nate Santos will probably lead this team in scoring. Are you in on that also?
Oh yeah. I would
say he's got the most ways to score for us, correct?
Yes, I would absolutely say he's the most multifaceted.
Okay. I think this is his season. I know he tested the waters of the transfer. Did he go? Did he not go? He comes back. He's healed up from his surgery. I know that takes a little bit of time also, but I would assume night in, night out, Nate Santos is going to be our go-to guy when we need a bucket. Is that? I mean, I feel like everybody's probably feeling that, but I don't know if I've heard everybody come out and say it yet.
Yeah, I'm sure the chat, I'm sure anyone watching or listening will agree to it. Yeah, I think it would be, we'd be very surprised, I think, if Nate Santos didn't lead the team in scoring. I mean, maybe that could be a good thing if Nate Santos ends up popping off and someone else ends up popping off as well.
Of course. But I'm not against anybody else getting you 15 a game, I'm assuming Santos is probably like going to be a 15 to 17 type guy a game.
Yeah. Yeah, on that point, I actually got a question for you, Doug. So if Santos is leading the scoring, who in your mind would be second?
Ideally, I think we need to have a mixture. So I would like, because Santos will probably be, while he is going to score in multiple ways, I would say a lot of his damage will come from the 3-point line. I think we need to utilize Zed Key's ability around the basket. He's had those 4 years at Ohio State. He's got good touch around the rim, and he's got a solid post hook to both hands. I would like to see Zed Key get 10 to 12 points a game. And that may not be good for like the second best scorer on the team, but I'd like to see a concerted effort of working Zed Key into, 8 to 10 shots a game type situation. So he may not be the second leading scorer, but I'd like to see him be in the running for that position.
Yeah, you make a very good point about that. I think Zed Key, and not to go off topic with the Flyers stuff, but seeing what he did in the Big Ten tournament before the March Madness started, I saw a lot of what you just talked about. Zed Key can deliver all those things to get you 10 to 12 a night. And I think that's going to be super clutch, especially when we come to that non-con play. Someone like Northwestern and Marquette.
And we're going to touch on the schedule here. Connor, any last thoughts on the roster rotation you want to touch on before we start talking about the schedule breakdown?
Yeah, I think the last thing I want to say is I've got my predicted starting five, Doug. This might stir a lot of debate in the chat, and I'd be very curious to hear what you all have to say about this. By all means, fire away if you think I am full of crap or accidentally a genius. I think the Flyers, when it comes time for non-con play, I think the starting lineup will be Posh Alexander at the 1. I'm going to see Enoch Cheeks at the 2.
Yeah.
I know that's a wild take, but I think it gives us a little more size. Put Santos at the 3. I could see Amal Letang at the 4, and then put Zedkey at the 5. Maybe switch those two up, but I could see that starting 5, and then key 6-man would be someone like Javon Bennett.
Okay. See, I'm all in on that. I want that because I think it gives them the most versatility. I think that gives them options with two guards who can attack. You got Nate Santos on the wing who can do everything. Emil Letang, stretch 4, who has the ability to go inside with his size and block shots, rebound. Zedkey, who he by all indications is good on both ends, defensively and offensively, to an extent. I like that lineup a lot, and I think it provides versatility, and that's what this team needs without a bona fide superstar. I like that lineup a lot. I would assume. I just what I just would love to get inside the minds of the coaching staff to see what they see in practice and know why are we going this way? Why are we not going for a little bit more size?
Right.
Again, on next Monday, we're going to find out. We're going to find out a lot. And yeah, it's against St. Francis. It's a win. It's going to be a win, even if they don't play well. But we're going to see, what from the exhibition did we take and learn, and what did we not? And that's what I'm excited about Monday is a learning experience on our way to the non-conference schedule. I'm glad you brought that up. Let's change paces here, Connor. We're going to go to schedule breakdown. Let me get the schedule pulled up here. All right. We know the exhibition games have already happened. We know they were not great, but again, exhibition games. Connor, on Monday, St. Francis at the UD Arena, 7:00 start. Look, that's going to be a win. We know they're going to win the game. We know what we're going to be looking for from this game. What's the rotation? What's the lineup? How does all that feel? Then we've got Northwestern coming into UD Arena on that following Saturday. How do you feel about the Northwestern game on that Saturday?
First of all, I love that it's a Saturday game. It gives a chance for every Flyer on campus to be in attendance, which, yes, Flyers on campus, I beg you, please be as loud as you could possibly be. Fill that arena. I love that Northwestern being the second game of the year. I know that may build pressure on the new lineup, but guess what? That's how we're going to fix those teething problems going into Maui and going into more of that non-con. I like the lineup that I mentioned before we change topics. The lineup that I mentioned, I think, is going to be perfect to start against St. Francis. That way, with that lineup, we can figure out what went right, what went wrong, fix some of the teething problems, because we have a massive test in a Northwestern team directly after that. And I enjoy it. I'm not going to call St. Francis a warm-up. Absolutely not. But I will call it the first step towards the big test.
And that's well said. And then Northwestern, obviously, they bring in 2 7-footers also. So that's going to be interesting. How do we guard against them? How do we make that? How do we go bigger against Northwestern, who they're going to have a size advantage in most positions. Their smallest player, I believe, is 6'3". So we're going to definitely have some interesting matchups in that game. That lineup that you suggested seems like it fits. Give me your prediction. Northwestern at home, UD. Who wins?
Flyers, of course. All day long, baby. Let's go.
All right. So 2-0, 2-0 start. Then we've got Ball State. I would assume we're both on a win here. And then we've got Capital at home.
Yep.
Capital, that doesn't really help us or anything, but that's a win. So that's a 4-0 start. New Mexico State comes to the arena. That's a 5-0 start. And then it gets interesting, Connor. Then it really gets interesting because then we take the trip down to Maui. And look, would I love for us to upset UNC in Maui? Yes. It's going to take a monumental effort to beat a UNC team who has RJ Davis, an All-American, who has these kind of athletes at their positions. How do you think that game shakes out? if you had to guess?
Well, either way, we're going to get the biggest test of the season at that point.
Yeah.
We know that. I think the Flyers, even with the new team, have potential to push North Carolina. I say that because let's remember what the Flyers tend to do in Maui. Yeah. 2019, we pushed an Anthony Edwards-powered Georgia to a crushing defeat. We pushed a Virginia Tech team, talked a lot of smack before that game, crushed them too. And then we took Kansas, that number one team in the country at that time, to overtime, the 4-point loss. Same if we want to bring 2021 up in the equation too. We play Miami, and then we play Kansas. Two of those teams, by the way, made the Elite Eight of the March Madness the following year. One of them ended up being the national champion. So I love that Maui gives us that preview of that, maybe the preview March Madness, but that field of unpredictability. And so I think, like the March Madness, going into Maui, all the bets could be off. We have no idea. But I think the Flyers have potential to test North Carolina. I think it would be obviously a great experience for the new Flyers to see how they fit in. But I think it will end up being close at points. I would love a Flyer win, but let's not forget, this is a Hubert Davis coached North Carolina.
Yeah.
Someone like an RJ Davis. They're not going to be quiet. So
they're going to be
very interesting to watch.
And then obviously, winner or loser of that game, we get an Auburn or an Iowa State team. That's going to be a fun matchup. That's what I like about Maui is even if it doesn't really go Dayton's way, we still get UNC. We still get an Auburn or Iowa State. We still get potentially a Colorado, a Memphis, a Michigan State. I would assume UConn probably wins this thing, but we get really good experience and really good games going to Maui. And I think that's the bright spot is, we may not win this thing this year. That field is absolutely bananas, but we get quality games. If we could steal a game in Maui, that would be huge.
It would be absolutely priceless.
Right. So I'm going to say we start 5-0, 5-1. I would say 6-2 coming out of Maui would be ideal. Does that sound fair?
I think that would be great. I think that would be absolutely great. We win the games we're supposed to. We maybe drop a game, but it's not like we're playing a quad 4 team in Maui.
And that's a
quality schedule. That is where the analysts are going to look at us, and regardless of how that's going to go, that's in the Flyers' favor.
Yeah, obviously.
I know people panic about Maui saying, "Oh no, Dayton is a minnow and a field of sharks." No, don't see it that way at all. I know these are tough teams, but let's remember. Come time for March Madness selection, should the Flyers be in the pool to go to the March Madness again, they're going to look back at what we do in those games, win or lose. They're going to look back at who we played.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So getting a win, no matter who it's against in Maui, that's an amazing way to start the season. Especially around 100%. Thanksgiving. We're giving a lot of thanks already. That's more to be thankful for.
Yep, that's going to be a fun week. Then we come home on December 3rd, Western Michigan. We both probably have the Flyers winning there. Lehigh, another game that the Flyers should win. And I hope, obviously we have them winning that game. And then we've got Marquette coming to UD Arena. This is a fantastically scheduled game. Fantastic scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
We get Marquette at UD Arena. That's going to be a tough one. I know Marquette sent a couple guys to the NBA. They're going to be reloading a little bit. I didn't see where they were projected to finish in not in the Big 12, but the Big East. Sorry.
Yeah.
I know, but Shaka Smart's a really good coach. He's got history here with UD.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that game? Because that could be interesting. If UD's, riding high off of Maui potentially, we get these Western Michigan Lehigh game out of the way. We got a standalone type game against Marquette. What are your thoughts there?
I mean, you took the 2 words out of my mouth. Shaka Smart. People, this guy coached for VCU. He was a massive rival for the Flyers. So he knows the arena. He knows our team. Shaka Smart is one hell of a coach.
Yeah.
You gotta respect him for what he does. And that Marquette team is not going to come quietly.
No.
So that arena is going to need every single one of you Flyers in order to come out with a win in that one. Marquette will challenge us, whether we like it or not.
Marquette is based on CBS, they are projected to finish 4th behind Xavier in the Big East, based on the media poll. So I just want to throw that out there so people have a gauge of, we saw what Xavier can do. Marquette is in that same territory. So Flyers have to be ready for that game.
Yes, you cannot let Shaka Smart get clever, because he is an absolutely clever coach.
No, he's really good.
Whether that's unlocking the back door, or whether that's getting guys open for any given three, Shaka Smart's going to bring everything. That Marquette team's going to bring everything. We have to know our rotations, and our players got to know what they have to do as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, you got to be on.
Film's got to be studied there
for that one.
Next game, to be studied.
UNLV, obviously they had the situation last year. We didn't get to play them. They also come to UD Arena. UNLV, they lost their talented freshmen. They had some turnover in the roster. They are middle of the pack in the Mountain West. What are your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I think schedule-wise, coming right off of Marquette, I think those are two challenging back-to-back games. I think that is one the Flyers can absolutely win.
Yeah.
I say that with a bigger degree of certainty against Marquette, not to be pessimistic, but I mean, again, Mountain West is not Big East. A Shaka Smart team versus a non-Shaka Smart team is very night and day. No disrespect to Shaka Smart, no disrespect to UNLV.
No, 100%.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that's not going to be a test.
They're projected to finish middle of the pack in their conference in the Mountain West. And then, Connor, we got our last non-con game. We got the Cincinnati game, at Heritage Bank Arena. I'll tell you what, man, Cincinnati, they're really, really good this year. In a loaded Big 12, they are projected to finish 7th. I mean, and that's absolutely a murderer's row in the Big 12 in terms of basketball. Kansas, Houston, Baylor, Iowa State, Arizona, Texas Tech, Cincinnati, loaded Big 12.
Yeah,
I'm a little worried. I got to be honest with you. I think Cincinnati is going to be one of the better teams we play, but by that point in the season, I'm hoping Dayton is rolling, ready for conference play.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts? Because we took it to him last year. Dron Holmes had a big game. It's going to be on ESPNU. I'm excited. What are your thoughts on that Cincinnati game in December?
Yeah, I mean, I think having a third game in a 6-day span, especially when you play a Marquette and UNLV, that's gonna we're gonna be battered. Let's be honest. But I think you make it a great point. You made a great point about having a lot of experience under our belt in non-con already. I think that's the perfect game to end the non-con, purely because I think by that point we have to hope. We know what we need to do. We did it last year. Anthony Grant's got to find a way to instill that confidence. So I think someone like Nate Santos, Isaac Jack, Enoch Cheeks, Javon Bennett, players who have been there before, who were there last year, we are going to put a lot on those guys to make sure that we come into that ready and we come out with that victory. But to your point, Big 12, not an easy conference whatsoever. Cincinnati will face competition in that season.
Oh my gosh.
So they're going to come in roaring as well, because they are going to want a win before they enter the hell that is their conference, especially given that it is in Cincinnati.
No, that's a great point. Yeah. Obviously, it's not a complete home game for Cincinnati, and UD will obviously travel and take over Heritage Bank. That's a toss-up for me. I would not be surprised if that goes either way. Obviously, I think you made a good point. 3 games in 6 days against relatively high-quality opponents. Watch out for that game. Then we get into the conference schedule, Connor. We get that week and a half off, Christmas, regroup, heal our wounds, that kind of stuff. Then we've got LaSalle coming to UD Arena. We've got, LaSalle's a team that we sometimes have had some struggles with that are always kind of making me scratch my head. But LaSalle's picked to finish last in the A-10 this season. I've got that as a win for us. At George Washington, they keep improving, Connor, but they're not there yet.
Right.
Then we got at UMass. This is their last season in the A-10. Frank Martin does a good job, man. Wherever he goes, he just seems to do a good job and get his team to where they need to be. What are your thoughts on UMass, their last year in the A-10?
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I haven't really given too much thought into UMass leaving the A-10, but I mean, hey, it's a big deal when a team's right. It's a big deal when teams are leaving a conference, right? You know, it's can open the door to new competition. So maybe perhaps UMass is going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, being like, "Hey, we're going up, but we're not going out without a fight."
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. Given it's away, I gotta be honest. Like I'm looking at those games surrounding the UMass game, George Washington and George Mason.
Yep.
People, I'm born and raised outside of DC. I had experience going to games against GW and at George Mason. I don't know what it is about the DC and DMV teams, but they always tend to be a thorn in the Flyers' side, home or away. So I think it's great that we're playing Mason at home. But my God, man, we have to put up a fight at George. We have to win that game by at least 10, George Washington, in order to instill that level of confidence going into George Mason, because we cannot let George Mason have our number again, especially when you look at the opponent after that. You got Loyola Chicago coming right in.
And we don't need that reminder. Really well. They've played the Flyers really well ever since they've gotten in the A10.
Yeah.
That 2-game stretch right there, Mason and Loyola, they might tell us a lot about how Dayton will be in the conference slate. And then we've got obviously Duquesne at Duquesne. They're in a rebuilding stage. They get in Drew Joyce as the head coach. Things are slightly probably improving there at a higher pace than we would say because of his ties and recruiting and things like that. And then we have St. Joe's comes to UD Arena. That's on ESPN2. That's a huge game. St. Joe's is obviously picked to finish near the top of the A10. They've got a very talented backcourt in their own right. That's going to be a fun matchup to see how, Posh and some of these guys, how they guard Reynolds and Brown and all that. That's going to be a fun matchup at UD Arena.
Yeah, I would say St. Joe's is big.
Yep. Then we go to at St. Bonnie's, at St. Louis, Davidson at home, VCU at home, at Fordham, Duquesne, at Loyola, at Rhode Island, Richmond, St. Louis, at VCU. So our last 5 games, we got to go at Loyola, at VCU to close out the year. There's some big time games to close out that season, man. Some absolutely just ball busting type games.
100%. I mean, that's plus at the end of the year, man. I mean, if that is the time, if we haven't fixed our teething problems, we have to really start raising questions. I hope we don't have to raise the questions.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is the A10. We've seen how unpredictable that's going to end up being. At VCU is going to be telling. We have to hope that we know where we're going to be prior to that VCU game. I'm not saying we need to take our foot off the gas by any means going into that game, but we need to make sure that either we're a already solidified tourney team or we're a bust. We're going to be one of those two heading into VCU. We cannot be middle of the pack going into VCU at VCU because that is not a team that's not a team that'll let up in their own right. They're not going to go slow. St. Louis, I feel like is the most underrated. It could be the most underrated team in the A10. Remember, they got a guy, Robbie Avila. They got that dude is. Oh yeah, I mean, if you guys haven't heard of Robbie Avila, like, just watch his tape, and I dare you to say any other NBA player's name than Nikola Jokic.
A light version.
He has got light version still, but that is a feared type of player to face.
Oh yeah.
So home and away, that's going to be test.
I mean, it's that last 5 games. Like I said, at Loyola, we got Rhode Island. They're going to be improved. Richmond, we'll see how they are. St. Louis at home, that's going to be tough. And then at VCU, that's a rough end of the year, rough end of the season. Connor, let's see it. Where do you predict Dayton falls in the A10 this season?
I'm going to say a confident second.
Who wins the A10 then?
I got to be honest, man. I see St. Louis upsetting a lot of people.
Wow. Okay. St. Louis.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. They got their new coach, but they got a lot of players who want to play for that coach. I mean, you don't get a guy like Robbie Avila to come to the A10 without someone he knows. So there's a lot of familiar chemistry going on there. And I've always said, especially when watching the NBA or watching other sports, you don't necessarily need a bunch of all-stars on your team. You need a lot of good chemistry too. Yeah. And the Flyers have a great deal of that as well. So players like Santos, players like Enoch Cheeks, players like Isaac Jack even, I think those players really need to power our chemistry. And I think we have potential to do so. I think it's going to be an entertaining A10 season. I think it's going to be an entertaining non-con. but we gotta be focused. We gotta be healthy. Moreover,
for sure.
And we definitely, if we fall, look, we got to get right back up because this is a schedule
you can't
that
lose
is
2 in a row in the A10.
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. I mean, I dare I say we cannot afford to lose 3 at all.
It's gonna be tough.
I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose 3, but it's a testing schedule.
You win St. Louis. I'm gonna say VCU wins and we finish second. St. Louis and St. Joe's finish in that 3 to 4 spot. They mix it up there a little bit. I think VCU gets in the tournament, and if Dayton can figure this out, I know I said this wasn't a good team after the exhibition games. I know people didn't love that, but you know, again, you watch basketball, you see that it's not working. You got to, there's plenty of time for this to turn into a good basketball team.
Yep.
I think we finished second in the A10 this year. That gives everybody on the team a year to develop. Next season, though, Letang, Musa, those guys, watch out. That's where
we have to be a sudden favorite for one, especially next year with those guys.
But Connor, is there anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here today? We've taken 45 minutes. I appreciate you giving all your time. Is there anything else you want to touch on Dayton Flyers wise before we head out tonight?
No, we touched up on a whole lot. I definitely want to thank you, Doug, for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's always great to see you. Always great to talk Flyers. I appreciate everyone in the chat, wherever you're listening or watching from. Appreciate the love from Flying with Doug, from my podcast. Remember, my podcast has a new name, the Concept University of Dayton. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Pods. My first episode will be uploaded next week, post Dayton Flyers first game. So be on the lookout for that. But I gotta say, roll yours. I am pumped up for this season. I don't think I've been more pumped up for a Dayton Flyers season than this one.
That's well said. There's a lot of uncertainty, and you get that kind of nervous energy when you don't know what. Like with Theron Holmes, we were like, okay, we're gonna be good no matter what. We got this guy who's an NBA player. We got an All-American. We know we're gonna be in the mix no matter what. This year we have that uncertainty, that kind of nervous energy. We don't know. Again, guys, please check out Connor Clark at the Concept. Check out his podcast. He does fantastic work. We're going to have you on a couple times throughout the season, hopefully talk and go over some of the things we talked about here tonight. Excellent. He does an excellent job on his podcast, guys. Thank you for listening to Flying with Doug tonight. We'll have the audio version out on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. If you could, leave a review. If you hate me, leave a review. I understand. I just appreciate you guys listening. Again, that's been Flying with Doug. Thank you, Connor. And we will see you guys Monday night after the St. Francis game to recap all the action. See you then.